način da se dopadnem lepim pametnim ženama kao što ste vi, a da ne regram ružni muškarce koji su pokvarili izdajnici montijalisti.
Dragoš Kalajić was a Serbian esotericist, painter, and all-around Renaissance man, an acquaintance of many great thinkers such as Julius Evola and Ezra Pound. Kalajić was born in Belgrade on February 22, 1943, in the midst of World War II. Due to the confines of the communist education system, after their post-war usurpation of power in Yugoslavia, he emigrated to Rome and studied art at the Accademia di Belle Arti.
Many are familiar with the great names of traditionalist thought, such as Julius Evola and René Guénon, but I'd wager that few viewers of this video are familiar with Kalajić. One of the main reasons he is not well known in the English-speaking world is that most of his work has not yet been translated. In this video we will attempt to briefly showcase his life and his works, for those viewers who are not able to read Serbian. It is also interesting to note that Kalajić was responsible for introducing the works of René Guénon and Julius Evola to Serbia. He was the force behind several television shows, such as Ogledalo 20. veka, and more importantly, Mont Blanc. Mont Blanc was a show that premiered in the 90s and covered many topics ranging from geopolitics to prophecy, and featuring many interesting interviewees.
Pomoz Bog, braćo i sestre Srbi i ostali Evropljani. Mesto naših susreta i razmišljanja obeležili smo imenom najvišeg vrha Evrope kao znak težnje da stvari i pojave sagledavamo sa najvišeg osmotrišta.
Before we move on to his formative years in Rome, Kalajić reflected on an important life lesson that he learned while living behind the Iron Curtain, with the ever-present threat of getting disappeared due to his family's dissident behavior. I will never forget the lesson that Comrade Kalajić taught me. He was the director of the Center for Pioneers. I was 11 years old, and one day he summoned me to his office on the first floor. He was seeing red. He first commanded me to sit down in the armchair across his desk. I vividly recall the style, pre-war Art Deco, leather. I sat down and he told me, "You must sit here until the UDBA, the Yugoslav KGB, comes to arrest you." Keeping in mind that, at the time, a fear of the UDBA was palpable and ever-present in society, I thought it would be a completely normal thing for them to actually arrive and arrest me. That is a testament to the times, and again, considering that my family had many ties to communists who were sent to Goli Otok, which was a gulag for dissenters and so-called enemies of the state, I had already acclimatized myself to the idea that the UDBA agents could arrive at any time of the day or night to arrest me. That knowledge was simply a part of my daily life. After some minutes of silence, he said, "I was kidding. You are free to leave." Many years later, I came across him on the street and asked him, harking back to my pioneer days, "Comrade Kalajić, do you recall how you told me I was under arrest?" He answered, "Of course I do." So I asked him why he did it. He was frank in his reply. "You know, I was afraid of the UDBA. I had to break this fear and get it out of me. You seemed to be someone who could help me with that. On the other hand, I could see you had a mind of your own. I wanted to train you, for when the time came that they were truly there to arrest you, you would remain hard as steel and not bend the knee."
As was mentioned previously, Kalajić moved from communist Yugoslavia to Rome to study at the Academy of Fine Arts. He graduated in 1965 with the highest marks in his class. After completing his training, he began living and working in Belgrade and in Rome. While in Rome, Kalajić became an acquaintance of Julius Evola, the traditionalist thinker well known for his books Revolt Against the Modern World, Ride the Tiger, and The Metaphysics of War, among others. Kalajić met Evola during his studies, and in his own words, this is how they met.
"I was brought to Evola by virtue of his curiosity, due to a young right-wing anarchist, a lumpen proletariat, a certain Christina, who ran away from home and was literally barefoot, and to whom I, out of pity, gave a required roof over her head in my studio apartment. Seeing my complete indifference to her charms, and perhaps in order to make me jealous, she told me how she took part in tantric sexual rituals with Evola in a fluid way because the man was completely deprived of movement below the spine due to a shrapnel blow at the end of World War II during yet another bombing run of Vienna. Looking at me, bold as I was, and in a white Playboy uniform, Evola saw in me the ideal interlocutor to whom he would brag about his conquests of the better half of humanity.
While in Rome, a rather amusing and interesting event occurred where Kalajić spotted another well-known thinker of the time by the name of Jean-Paul Sartre. During one pleasant evening in Rome, Kalajić was dining at a favorite restaurant of his when Kalajić noticed Sartre entering. He alerted the owner, whom he was friends with, and wanted to ensure that the atmosphere of the establishment remained aesthetically pleasing. In order to ensure this, he made himself appear as a waiter and came over to Sartre's table and politely told him that all the tables for the evening were reserved. Sartre then replied, "Don't you know who I am?" Kalajić replied, "No, and if you disagree, you can speak to the owner." After impotently trying to explain who he was, and due to the fact that the owner only spoke Italian, Sartre thus gave up and left with his entourage. In the lead-up to the 90s and the Yugoslav Civil War, he made a name for himself through writing for a Serbian weekly news magazine by the name of Duga. Duga was well known for its opposition to communism and also for its interviews with the dissident voices of Yugoslavia. Through this, he was one of the central influences in the new Serbian right. During the war, Kalajić was present on the front lines reporting and also meeting with volunteers who sought to help the Serbian and thus European cause against the globalists and their useful idiots in Zagreb, Sarajevo, and Tirana. Due to the nature of his responsibilities, at times he only slept for 4 hours per night, for days on end. Here, in this picture, Kalajić was overlooking Sarajevo and was also present at the Kupris Plateau and Han Pijesak. Despite these hardships, Kalajić's esotericism and personal magnetism came from the solar sphere, from the landscape where the sun, which he painted so many times, never sets. In the darkest days of the war, he wanted to organize an exhibition dedicated to light, but he was not able to do so. After discussions during prime time on Italian television, in which he valiantly defended Serbia, his last solo exhibition in Rome received great publicity. I like to end this segment with a quote from his friend and fellow painter Mihajlo Tigalo.
He was a charismatic gentleman, the founder of our new elite, an artist who walked the paths of roses and steel. When he suddenly entered our environment, we were all surprised. Out of nowhere, a lad of extraordinary eloquence, sharpness of mind, and considerable artistic talent appeared among us. He was a kind of prince for us, and he stayed that way.
Earlier, we mentioned that he studied at the Academy of Fine Arts in Rome. This would prove to be vital for what is perhaps the most well-known aspect of Kalajić amongst Western Europeans, which is his Hyperborean realism art style. As familiar as he was with the experience of pop art and the later glamorous types and techniques of hyperrealism, he was the first true representative of our new figuration and the forerunner of all future ideas of restoration. This agreement with the worldview of 68 gradually directed his artwork towards abandoning all types of historical avant-garde and turning to the aesthetics of the beautiful, esoteric, and cosmological in the traditional and not counter-initiatic sense. The golden peaks of mythical mountains, the Indo-European and Aryan symbolism of his paintings separated him from everything known on the Serbian and European art scene of this time. The form of art with its use of symbolism and style is reflective of the Indo-European and Aryan spirit. It is stated that Kalajić's vision of art is bright, imbued with heroic optimism and a utopian portrayal of a strict order in the function of some superior interdisciplinarity. One of the main reasons for creating this type of art was to reawaken the European spirit and give Europeans a helping hand in remembering their primordial Hyperborean identity. Kalajić has also written books such as Stronghold, Map of Anti-Utopias, American Evil 1 and 2, Europe Betrayed, and The Last Europeans, among others, with his magnum opus being Serbian Children of the Empire. Serbian Children of the Empire is a testimony about the spiritual heights of a Europe that perhaps no longer exists except in the hearts of its last known and self-vowed guardians. These last guardians still stand upright among the ruins, beautiful and brave, tragic and majestic, and in their loneliness they find no reason to hesitate, to compromise, or surrender. Here, we would like to give you an excerpt from this book. In this excerpt, the protagonist and his friend reminisce on a lesson from the past given unto them by their teacher nicknamed Caesar.
I do not know if you recall Caesar's class in the National Museum. When the question of the root cause of our defeats, from the collapse of Dušman's empire to the Battle of Kosovo Field, was put before us.
I recall how you said that the cause cannot be solely attributed to a lack of unity among the nobility, as that particular flaw was present in the elites of many other peoples too.
Yes, that is when Caesar tasked me with finding other causes, and I found one. When comparing the core of our empire and the Roman Empire on whose foundations our empire was based, only one element was missing for our emperor's title to rightfully be Stephanus Rex, fere totius imperi Romani dominus, as he already styled himself. An imperial ideology. Alas, he did not have enough time to create one. An ideology worthy of an empire is based on heavenly heights. This is why Cicero, in Somnium Scipionis, writes that of all things that exist in this world, none are more dear to God than the unification of people around the principle of justice that we call a state.
There are few public figures who, although valued and respected during their lives in like-minded circles, experience full affirmation only after death, undergoing a re-evaluation in the intellectual and academic environments that had previously vehemently opposed them, thus finally confirming the truth of their visionary attitudes and lives. I am convinced that in the coming years and decades, such a fate awaits Dragoš Kalajić, our famous painter, writer, and philosopher. For the majority of our contemporaries, a cessation of the relentless participation in media banality brings an inevitable decline into oblivion and consequently a loss of popularity and relevance, while for those rare and exceptional avant-garde spirits and extraordinary thinkers like Dragoš Kalajić, such an absence makes their thoughts seem even more mystical, deeper, and far-reaching. And the passage of time adds to their words a layer of perennial wisdom and prophetic power. Although he has been gone for many years, it seems that Kalajić and his works have never been more current, necessary, and significant than at this very moment, during this prolonged winter of dissatisfaction. While we attempt to stand upright in the midst of an unprecedented storm of nihilism and hopelessness and try to make sense of our lives among the ruins of failing states, failed ideologies, and a global economic system in the process of disintegration. It is difficult to put into words everything that Kalajić was: a gifted and original painter, a refined literary erudite, a philosopher of the third way, and a demystifier of modernity, a lucid polemicist and a brilliant speaker, a political provocateur and a charismatic ideologue of the right, a spiritual aristocrat, and a gentleman seducer, but above all, a Hyperborean, the last European and uncompromising Serbian patriot and brave fighter from the front lines, a citizen of Belgrade and Chubura, a naturalized Roman, a self-declared pagan with orthodox impulses, but more than that, and above all, Kalajić was, for those who read his works, a teacher in that noble ancient sense of the word. Towards the end of his life, leading Italian newspapers dedicated whole pages to him and his ideological activities, while at the same time he could neither publish nor appear in the Serbian media. The director and curator of the Museum of Contemporary Art in Belgrade launched a smear campaign against him, even though he was one of the pillars of modern Serbian art. These detractors only assured him of his own worth, and the attacks amused him. On the 22nd of July 2005, at the age of 62, Dragoš Kalajić passed away. While he may no longer be with us physically, his legacy lives on and inspires many Europeans to this day. I'd like to end with this essay featuring Kalajić and Max Ferrari from the Lega Nord, who you can see on the screen right now during a conference in the 90s.
We are much more alert and alive than our Western relatives, thanks to the fact that we have continuously defended this part of Europe, and thus been a constant target of conquerors for centuries. Already, Brynjanski in the novel with the Hyperboreans noticed how, in the area where he was born, people fought hard for centuries against Christian influence, while our northern and eastern relatives capitulated almost overnight. In the novel The Last Europeans, as well as in the study European Ideology, I recall the heroic and desperate struggle of the Romanian sovereign Stefan the Great against the Turkish invaders. No one from the West provided him with the requested military assistance, and the little money that was collected was embezzled by the Hungarian king. 2 centuries after the Battle of Kosovo, Europe became aware of its true importance. So Giovanni Carlo Saraceni, in his Tales of Wars, published in the year 1600, noticed that the overwhelming conquest of the Turks have their roots in Christian discord. Still, there has been some progress. It has been 4 years since the Italian publishing house All'insegna del Veltro published my work on Atlanticist aggression and the Serbian struggle, titled Serbia, the Trench of Europe. And today, on the pages of the weekly Il Federalismo of the ruling Lega Nord, one can read these encouraging observations by Max Ferrari, set out in an essay titled Kosovo, the Last Defense. The Atlanticist aggression on Serbia opened the infamous Islamic corridor that Dragoš Kalajić has been talking about for years, who in Serbia, the Trench of Europe, explained the importance of the Serbian bulwark. Unfortunately, our politicians did not listen to Kalajić, so today that corridor is not only open, but it has also been widened, as NATO troops and the UN do everything except stand up to Albanian bribery, refusing to prevent terrible violence against Serbs who are left at the mercy of fanatics that wish to see them killed, raped, and who set fire to the houses of those who dare reside on their ancient Serbian land.